Hello and welcome back to Making the Argument. Today we've got a special guest for you, and we're gonna have an important conversation because I'm gonna be honest. Lately, I've started to wonder whether or not left or right are even capable of effectively discussing things with one another anymore. When it comes to anything controversial, it almost seems impossible. It feels like we're speaking two entirely different languages. And today's guest is look, I'm not being hyperbolic here. This is one of the few guys that I have seen where I have listened to him, and whether we may agree or come down exactly on the same point of a particular issue, um, I always feel like I've learned a lot when I listen to him. And I feel like he's always treated his guests, regardless of who he's speaking to, with an incredible amount of respect. And I think that's in part because regardless of political affiliations, regardless of particular policy outcomes, I believe this is a guy that honestly is seeking to get to the truth. And when you can do that, when you can do it through civil discourse, and that is your honest goal, I think you can actually accomplish a lot. So we are thrilled to have on today the host of Impact Theory, Tom Bilyeu. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm ready for this. This is going to be fun.
Well, good, because you've had some. You've just had a really interesting discussion with Ian Bremmer. You talked with Douglas Murray recently. One of the things I really want to get to right off the bat, I mean, obviously, anybody that hasn't seen Impact Theory should immediately go over and subscribe and start watching, because you guys do have some really interesting conversations. But again, I look at some of the people you have on your show, and we're talking like, opposite ends of the political spectrum. Very, very different ideas about what's going on with current politics, with cultural issues. Here's my question, and this goes right into what I kind of let us off with. Have we gotten to a point where, when we look at left and right, have we gotten to a point where we are coming from two fundamentally different positions of viewing information and data, that this is different than what we may have experienced in the past? We're no longer arguing, which of the top marginal tax rate should be. We're arguing about basic reality. Do you think that has become so prominent within the discussion now that it's almost impossible to have a good conversation, or am I being a little bit too black pilled?
Nope. I think that is exactly correct. It's something I call frame of reference. So frame of reference is built on your biology, your beliefs, and your values. And it will control not only what you look at, but it will control what you see. It is one of the most fascinating things about the human brain, is that we can actually look at the same thing and see something fundamentally different. And then if you layer on top of that the desire to play team sports, where I need the things that I see to line up with this. So we have an incentive, I won't say lie to ourselves, but we have an incentive to see something in a certain way, married to a biological propensity to see things in a way that aligns with our frame of reference, or that's controlled by our frame of reference. And now people just flywheel out of control. So yes, political discourse at this moment, I think it cycles more than it's like, oh my God, it's never been like this previously. I think it has. But it's certainly exacerbated by algorithms.
So here's, I want to ask a question on that, because I would have typically agreed that this goes in cycles. And because obviously there's been various points. A lot of times when we talk about disagreement, or let's say a lack of capacity to understand one another, we point to some of the worst periods in human history where, I mean, it's devolved into violence and genocide and everything else. The thing that I would say strikes me as different, though, is that even in those periods of history where I look back and I look at discourse completely devolving into violence and conflict, everyone still, for the most part, understood why the conflict existed, right? Everyone might agree that, hey, it sure is a shame we're shooting each other right now, but everyone seemed to be pretty much on the same sheet of music on why they were shooting each other. But I look at
I
it
have
now.
a feeling that's actually looking back, like through the lens of history, it probably feels that way. But I have to imagine, like, just take the American Civil War. If you're on the ground at that point, like, algorithms can divide us, but not as violently as geography.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're growing up in the South and you're hearing all the people that believe the things that the people in the South believed, it's all you would know. You may never actually encounter a Northern person's belief. You would hear the local guy's interpretation of a Northerner's belief. But today you can walk down the street and you're far more likely to bump into people that have differing views than and this is obviously conjecture, than I think you would have if your ultimate algorithm was geography. So this is why religions tend to be so geographically bound. It's just you, historically speaking, you would be born into a religion. Everybody believed the same. They might argue amongst themselves, but they have the same shared frame of reference. And so I think geography is way more likely to give you just completely divergent frames of reference than algorithms. Clearly, we're seeing it. We know that it does happen regardless of geography. But anyway, my gut instinct is geography minus the ability to connect with people around the world is going to shovel people down chutes far more than an algorithm.
Guys, I'm going to level with you. It's important that you look good for your lady. And ladies, you know this is true as well. And that's why I'm encouraging you to go check out True Classic. That's right. I wasn't the first one to discover True Classic. It was my wife, because she wanted shirts that fit me appropriately instead of the crap that I used to buy at box stores that, well, you probably have some in your drawers as well. But the bottom line is I am now a true believer in True Classic. Why? Because it fits just the way it should around the shoulders, chest, and arms, while leaving a little extra space during the midsection, which I'm still working on, so leave me alone about it. But if you too want to get some great t-shirts, and not just t-shirts, my friends, dress shirts, pants, workout gear, hoodies, just about everything you can think of, go over to trueclassic.com/Nick and take a look at everything they have to offer, because I'm telling you right now, True Classic probably represents about 70% of my wardrobe. In fact, if they ever make suits, it's all of my wardrobe. trueclassic.com/Nick. Go check it out right now. Let's get back to the show. So let me ask you this. When we kind of going back to, laying that as a groundwork and then going into the discussions that we have right now where people feel very passionately about things, what do you think? Obviously people are going to want the truth to correspond with deeply held beliefs, whether it does or it doesn't. And that causes friction. How do you think we do a better job of essentially two people coming down who see something with a very, very different perspective, maybe want very, very different outcomes? Do you think that, because I'm basing this off of the idea that I just had a conversation with somebody that I disagree with on politics, but I still thought it was a very, very productive conversation. And again, from my perspective, it was because there seemed to be a baseline commitment to this idea of the laws of logic, that there were various rules that both of us could follow in order to analyze data. And if we were wrong about something, it didn't mean we were bad or evil or stupid. It just meant like, oh, that's new information. Thank you for that. And now I can make better decisions going forward. So what do you think has changed? Because again, I feel like it's more recent. What do you think that it has changed, if anything, that has made those conversations so much more difficult to have?
You're in an economically tragic moment, truly tragic, and algorithms. It really is those plugging into the natural state of the human mind. I don't think you have to look much farther than those two things.
So you don't think it has anything to do, I'll give you an idea of one of the things that to me feels like it changed. I've been in a state legislature for 10 years. And when I first got into that state legislature, I felt like there was a lot more commitment to certain underlying concepts and ideas about what governed reality. If you would have told me that 5 years into it, we would be sitting here having these incredible debates about what is a woman, I would have said, no, this is something that's fairly well established with respect to human history. And it's not, to your point earlier, it's not something that's worth having a debate over. We already understand it. So and yes, we understand that people may see things differently and it's fine for them to do what they want, but we're not going to govern policy for millions of people based off of, this kind of idea or viewpoint. And I started chasing that back down. I was like, okay, how did we go from everyone agrees on this to now all of a sudden this is seemingly overnight. And as I started to look at things like postmodernism and critical theory and whatnot, I felt like it wasn't that we just had different perspectives on reality. Now we were having completely different discussions on what constitutes reality. And I feel like that opens up the whole space.
Fair. I think I'm pushing down too far to say algorithms instead of social media. Mm-hmm. So what's happening right now from where I'm sitting is people are no longer convinced that their life will be better than their parents. And they're right, by the way, because of the economic tragedy that I was alluding to. So you have that, something is wrong, people can feel it. And then social media allows really terrible ideas to gain traction very rapidly. Mm. And we can get into this thing I call the dumb voter problem. People really do not like that. And if I had a better name for it, I like that it's a little bit offensive. I'm going to be honest. But the part that people seem to miss is I think I fall into many people's sense of what a dumb voter is. Mm. So I'm using that to point at myself and say, there are people who consider me the dumb voter. And so the question becomes, what do you do with people that you think are too dumb to think through this? This is a battle that's raging right now that I think gets to the heart of what you're talking about. Social media has broken down the gatekeepers of narrative. And because there are no longer gatekeepers of the narrative, now all of a sudden, anybody with a microphone that is compelling can convince people who are too dumb to parse through the truth of the situation, perhaps including myself. And so there are people, many people that I have tremendous amount of respect for, but think they get this thing wrong. And I'll use Douglas Murray, who truly I have tremendous respect for. Mm-hmm. I would want him to recognize the way that I treat him privately and the way that I talk about him publicly. Douglas is brilliant. Douglas is lovely. Douglas is generous. Douglas is also wrong about wanting to make sure that only quote unquote experts speak on a topic. Same with Sam Harris. Literally all of those things are also true about Sam. Off camera, a lovely human being, one of the smartest people I've ever engaged with. If people are trying to dismiss him by saying he's stupid, that is, I think, a low utility belief for your own life, because Sam will give you a very sincere take on a topic that you don't have to agree with, but he's going to give you a perspective on that you might not have for yourself, and he will do it with a high degree of intelligence. Mm-hmm. But I think that he is wrong to want to control the narrative. So I personally, and people should read James Burnham's work on the book specifically that I think is just a masterwork. It's called the Machiavellians. And in that book, he talks about how man as political animal will spin, lie, control as a way to gain and maintain power. And I think that belief has high predictive validity, meaning if you look at the world like that and go, oh, people will lie, spin, try to silence people so that they can create this layer of narrative that everybody shares, nobody questions, and life will be better. And the thing is, certain aspects of life are better when you do that. Mm-hmm. But I think in totality, because we are, as a species, very apt to make the mistakes that we made in COVID, which was to say, this is all settled. We know all of this. Shut up, do as you're told. And I think that that is hyper dangerous for a society that wants to make progress. And I think the very reason that evolution, or God, however you want to look at it, has made it such that people die is because, keep in mind, there are some species that don't, but humans do and have gotten this far, I think, because they die, not in spite of it. And so what I think is going on is beliefs tend to solidify. And a solidified belief may have made sense at one point in time, but is not going to lead to progress. And so there's a famous quote, I think it was from Max Planck. Oh God, it was one of those guys from that era. And he said, science does not advance one insight at a time. It advances one funeral at a time. Because the people with these crystallized beliefs, they have to die off. And so what I'm saying is, I get it. You don't want people saying that the earth is flat. I get it. That's really annoying to have to argue with Terrence Howard when he's just talking nonsense. But it is people that come in and completely knock things off their current trajectory that get you to look at things in a brand new way. And maybe the vast majority of it's BS, but it stops those beliefs from solidifying to the point that society stops making progress. And so my answer to the dumb voter problem is, you have to accept that no one person is ever going to be right about who is smart enough to think through this stuff. You are far better to let everybody talk, everybody say what they think. Yes, you're going to have to fight these ideas and debate these ideas, and that will be exhausting for some people. But if you don't do that, belief systems calcify.
No, I think there's a lot of truth to that. It was interesting. And again, speaking at this university campus, there was one student where we were talking about the Department of Education potentially going away and what would that mean. And the argument I was making was, well, look, I actually don't think the federal government is a good place to try to monitor, control, or push education in a particular direction. And the student responded with, well, yeah, but students have a right to be taught correctly and to be taught the truth. And I said, so you want the government to determine what the truth is? Because there's a history
Yeah.
of this and it doesn't always go very well. And so no, I'm always skeptical when somebody says that, you can't have an opinion unless you have the requisite expertise. It's, well, no, you should be able to think things through. And when what expertise should signify in a proper debate, in a proper environment, we have freedom of inquiry, is this idea that you are so knowledgeable on this topic. You have spent so much time thinking about it. You've gathered other perspectives and ideas and concepts that you can convince me because you can convince me because of the depth and breadth of your knowledge and understanding, not because you've thrown up the expert card and now I'm supposed to shut up. If you're an
Yeah, and
expert, then convince me.
agreed. And part of what drives me crazy about the way that people think about experts is everything that somebody believes is riding on the back of base assumptions.
Mhm.
If they have an erroneous base assumption, then all of the very intelligent inferences that they draw from that, all the connections that they make. And I think the right way to think of this is an expert is somebody who looks up into the sky, they see a bunch of stars, and they draw a constellation. Now, the constellation isn't literally real, but it helps you navigate the open oceans. If, however, there is a better constellation, I would want to know about that. And so just like Newtonian physics, most people that have studied intelligence over time will say Newton is the smartest person that ever lived. And yet Newtonian physics wasn't correct.
Yeah.
So it was the most useful by far constellation, to keep with the analogy, that existed at the time, but Einstein comes along and gives us a better constellation. That doesn't mean that Newton wasn't brilliant. It doesn't even mean that he wasn't smarter than Einstein, but it does mean that there was an update to the constellation that was far better for navigating at sea at night. So that's what I'm trying to get into is, despite being an expert, they may have an underlying base assumption that just isn't correct. And so even though there's a ton of scaffolding that has internal logic and it all makes sense, if it's riding on the back of an erroneous assumption, that assumption is still worth approaching. And if that assumption is approached by somebody not as intelligent as them, I think it is a fool who says, shut up. Look how much smarter this person is than you. Look how much better educated they are. It's like, well, hold on. Are they right about the assumption or not?
Yeah.
And if they're not right about the assumption, then all bets are off and we need to debate the assumption.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's amazing how I feel like we've almost become so obsessed with credentialing that the credential is supposed to speak for itself. It's like, no. The credential is supposed to be representative of something. And if you're relying on the credential to shut me up, well, now I'm unimpressed with your credential.
And I'll get more aggressive about that. And I'll say, I don't care what the credential is supposed to be representative of. All the credential actually should mean is that this person has spent a lot of time focused on this topic, such that a governing body of some kind has said they have extracted high utility knowledge that they proved on a test or whatever. But my thing is, well, we're now in the real world. You have supposedly garnered a bunch of skills. Show me how those skills manifest in what I call a high utility way in the real world. For instance, if you're saying we judge high utility by the ability to amass wealth, then I'm an expert. I have done that. But what does that mean exactly? To me, it means I am really good at thinking up from first principles. Cool. But now I don't want any extra credit. I'm whatever topic we're pointing me at. If somewhere in there, I have made an erroneous assumption, and so I'm doing my best to think up for first principles, but I break at some point, I would expect people to point that out, whether they've made a penny in their life or not, because all I'm saying is the thing I'm good at, supposedly, is thinking from first principles. So just attack that. Like, we're literally live right now. I can walk you through it. Where I think people go, and this is what drives me nuts in debates, is they're not arguing from the position of what are your base assumptions? What are the things that you believe to be true? What is your value system? Because is and ought, people can get lost in those. And instead of arguing at the, what I call with my wife, don't argue at the level of the tea. The biggest fight my wife and I ever got into was over a cup of tea. 2 hours into a screaming match, I was like, there's no way this is about a cup of tea. It's literally not possible.
Yeah.
And so we said, okay, what is this really about? And we just did down to the base assumptions, the insecurities and everything that we were actually arguing about. Once we got to the real thing, then it was like, oh, cool. I understand your position now. I can repeat it back to you in a way where you will say, what is a magic phrase for us? You understand my position perfectly. Mm-hmm. If I understand your position perfectly and still am saying this thing, it's not because I'm confused, it's because I disagree. But I can articulate for you the beliefs or the values that I have that drive this now surface level thing that I'm saying we should do this instead. And in debates, they're almost always arguing at the level of the T instead of addressing the value system or the beliefs.
No, it's a great point. And again, serving in a legislature, we saw it all the time. And it was amazing too, how quickly somebody would associate a moral implication to a position on something. And the moral implication, and again, at some points you said, okay, is this person just genuinely confused about what I believe and why? Or are they doing this because it has political utility? It has political utility to cast somebody off as, well, you're just a bigot or a fascist or a commie or whatever else it is. And therefore I can take this term with moral connotations associated with it. The way I described it to somebody once, I said, if Hitler said it's good to brush your teeth, would you stop brushing it because Hitler said so? Like, well, no, of course not. Okay, but we all understand that accusing someone of being like Hitler or a Nazi all of a sudden brings with it all of this emotional and moral baggage that may not even be appropriate to the discussion that we're having. But it's politically useful if you're just trying to shut someone up. And
I think you're being too generous. I think that people would stop brushing their teeth, just as people on the left are defacing the best-selling electric vehicle when for years and years and years they fought for that. So this is why, like, for their own sake, I have escaped traps of my own suffering, of my own making, by forcing myself to articulate what is the belief or value that this thing, this behavior is riding on top of. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes they'll be like, it's just a feeling. And so I have a feeling that I'm right. But in business, I learned very quickly that feelings make dots feel like they connect that don't actually connect. And as soon as you have to articulate them ultra succinctly, people can't do it. Now, if we were to say, okay, you and I both agree that Hitler was bad, and I believe Hitler was bad because I have a value that says you ought not try to kill an entire group of people based on whatever identity, just to make it easy.
Yeah.
Cool. So now if you disagree with that value, we can debate that. And I want to separate that from why I want to brush teeth, right? So I believe that you want to run a certain set of chemicals across your teeth in order to protect them from sugar, just to make it really simple. We can also argue about that. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe fluoride is killing me and I have no idea. Cool. We can argue about those things. But when you're going, I look at Hitler makes me feel like I have this aggression, this anger, this just sense of, I know I'm right and that person must die. They should burn in hell for all of eternity, all of that. And now I bring that emotion to brushing my teeth, or just to bring it back to Elon Musk. They have an emotional reaction to a belief they have that he's trying to destroy. Let's just say he's trying to destroy things in the government meant to protect people that don't have money. Mm-hmm. And they probably have an algorithm running in their brain that says billionaires are just bad, full stop. They shouldn't exist. So they have this emotional valence on Elon. Billionaire already shouldn't exist. They have a belief articulated in their own mind or not. Billionaires only become billionaires by stealing from other people or taking advantage of them. So they see him, and now he's going into the government. They have a belief, again, real or not, that he's going to go in and strip away entitlements that are meant to help people less fortunate than him, which then just proves that this is what billionaires do. They go and take from other people. And so They could articulate all of those beliefs, and we could go one by one and say whether I agree, like, should billionaires exist? Tom Bilyeu believes, hey, if they can pull it off in a legal way, I love it. Let's go. I'm here for that. But if you get down to should a billionaire be able to steal from people? No, absolutely not. And I would expect that to be addressed. Should a billionaire be able to lie to the American public to get contracts for his business? No, they shouldn't. So it's like you can take them one at a time, but when it's all done at the level of emotional valence, that's when you get people keying the car of somebody who owns a Tesla, who could very well be a Democrat, totally on their side, hate Elon as much as they do. So it's like, hold on, your emotion makes this feel good, but it doesn't survive trying to actually connect the dots.
So let me ask you a question. When you are, let's say you find yourself in a discussion with somebody, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get it from kind of like the hyper emotional reaction, down to like, okay, let's bring this down to the base level as effectively as possible, and just start from there. What sort of what is your own thought process in determining, one, whether or not that is actually worth your time with a particular individual based off of the conversation or whatever it might be, and two, what's the sort of tactic that you use to go from, okay, this is, I can tell where this is going to go off the rails, and so we're going to kind of bring it back down into these base assumptions?
So I have an operating belief that is, I don't see any advantage to convincing people, but when I speak, I try to be convincing. Okay, what do I mean by that? I believe that in this age of social media, where everybody, including dumb people, maybe that's me, can have a platform where a lot of people hear them speak. And I encourage people, because it's been so advantageous in my life, whether you want to look at emotionally for my internal life, whether you want to look at my relationships, whether you want to look at my career, any of that stuff, it's just played out incredibly well, is to go, I am likely to be wrong often. But if I can find out the way in which I'm wrong, then I can get smarter in a way that has real world positive consequences. So I am constantly seeking disconfirming evidence. So I invite people to go into the world, find a bunch of very sincere people. I don't even need them to assume they're smart, but smart is great. But go find very sincere people that will give you a strong take on how they see the world. Just because that feels good, don't stop there. Once you start building your own worldview, then try to find people that can prove that that worldview is wrong. Now, why would you ever want to do that? Because being right feels so good, but it's low utility. Finding the right answer means that you can point at a thing that you want to accomplish. Have a good marriage, raise my children well, be deeper in my faith, whatever. There is an actual path to that. So now it's like, well, if I'm wrong, I'm not going to be able to walk that path. And I may not even realize that I'm not on that path. I'll just constantly ask myself, why does my life suck? And so if, on the other hand, I go, ooh, I'm going to go find a bunch of people. I'm not going to over-index on any one person. I want to find the person where I go, when I think the way that they think on this, and this person on this, and that person on that, and I bring them all together, then am I able to get to the goals that I'm aiming at? And if yes, then I'm going to keep doing more of that. And if no, I'm going to stop. So it is about making the decision that you're going to pursue the beliefs that have the highest predictive validity. Meaning, if I believe this, does it lead me to where I want to go? Am I able to predict the outcome of my behaviors? And that's it. So you never take any one person too seriously, and you're constantly embracing that you are wrong about something. You just probably don't know which things you're wrong about.
I think it's someone I think we both admire is Thomas Sowell.
Yeah. Raise a glass to my man.
I have a mug that says Thomas Sowell is a national treasure and not allowed to die.
For real. Oh, that watching him get older is heartbreaking.
It really is. I go back repeatedly and I watch his interviews with Uncommon Knowledge with Peter Robinson, because I think Peter Robinson's a good interviewer. And I always tell, one of the things I love the most about Thomas Sowell is not just because I believe he has a real knack for taking complex issues and breaking it down in a way that's very digestible, but he's also a smart ass. So he's actually really fun to listen to talk and read. But he talked about this whole idea of this concept of central planning. I thought of it as you were talking about this idea of going out and getting ideas and thinking about a particular objective that you want to meet and what are the steps to get to and what information is useful for that process. And I remember Sol, who I consider to be brilliant, saying, well, yeah, the problem with central planning is it doesn't matter it doesn't matter how smart the person is, doesn't matter how much data you give them, they cannot possibly possess a sufficient amount of the consequential knowledge in order to actually plan for millions of people making daily transactions and interactions and pursuing various goals. And the argument was, okay, yeah, but what if we had a really good computer system? Or now with AI, what does that potentially look like? And how does that push the boundaries of those assumptions? And what Sol went back into was, yeah, but you're still dealing with the individual needs, wants, desires, information, rationality of millions of people. And so even if you do have all of this great empirical data, that can still only take you so far with respect to trying to plan for everybody else. And I actually thought it was an incredibly humble way to look at some of the questions that we get so frustrated with one another on. And it goes back to also what you were saying about this concept of, look, there are going to be times where the expert with all the appropriate credentials gets it wrong because of what was baked into getting those credentials. There's going to be the time where the guy that walks up with none of those credentials gets it right. And the only way that you can actually go through this process in a way that kind of makes sense long term is to allow for that freedom of inquiry and those various ideas, not because it's a perfect system, but because there is no perfect system. And this is all about trade-offs ultimately. And so when you talk about obviously all of us operate to some degree off of heuristics, right? We can't have perfect, complete information about everything that we do. But you said something earlier about the fact that we're living in economically tragic times, greatly influencing the way that people are processing, reality right now. What do you, when you say economically tragic times, I think a lot of people, when you look at the course of human history, you think, what are you talking about? We're still living at yeah, things are not great, and may not be as good as they were for the previous generation, but surely we can still acknowledge that we're living in one of the most prosperous times throughout world history. What do you think makes this particular time period economically tragic?
Okay, so debt moves in cycles. Debt controls basically the entire economy, and that has been true for roughly the last 500 years. Unfortunately, because debt moves in cycles, these things become very predictable. So I'm certainly not saying that this is the worst time in history, but I am saying if you read Ray Dalio, he talks about debt moves in 6 cycles, and phase 6 is total collapse. Ray Dalio has pegged us at being in phase 5.5 for, I don't know, last 3 years. And you can feel the beats escalating that he's talking about. And from how does that manifest in a way that is tragic, catastrophic, is very simple. You become the world's reserve currency, and that gives you the ability to export your inflation. And for people that think, and this is one of those, I feel weird making this distinction because it sounds so stupid, but it actually is important to make this distinction. So depending on which study you look at, there's between 0.6 and 0.9 correlation between money printing and prices going up. So it is effectively the same phenomena. So even if you split the difference, you're talking 7.5-ish correlation. So sorry, 0.75 correlation. So they're effectively the same thing. And you end up printing money because you're spending at a deficit, and you can't actually do that because people, they'll buy your debt, but they certainly aren't just going to give you money and never expect to get anything in return. And so the way that you meet the obligations of your ever-growing debt is you print money. And we can go into as much or as little of how that mechanism works, but at a high level, if people just understand that. When you say that we're spending $2 trillion roughly every year extra, that money will be printed to pay for that debt. So if somebody goes to sell their government treasury and nobody's there to buy it, then the Fed will print money and the treasury will go in and buy that. So that's just how the money supply inflates. Now, it is inflation of the money supply that causes the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer. And it only exacerbates over time. It almost never, comes back together. I won't say it's hopeless, which is why Doge, fingers crossed, let's really hope. But the reality is that it throughout history has gone something like this. At first, nobody notices that you're printing money to cover your debts because everybody in the world is using your currency. And so everybody is taking it. And then it starts getting bigger and bigger, and the debts start getting really bad. And you get to the point where servicing the debt becomes the biggest expense to your government. And obviously, we are rapidly approaching that. It's already surpassed our government expenditures on the military, which should terrify everybody. That's just the interest. Okay. Yeah. So at this rate, it will very rapidly become bigger than all of our entitlements and everything. And that's just how countries go broke, because to cover those debts, you have to just print more and more money. Now, if printing money is essentially the same phenomena as prices going up, as you print more and more money, prices go up and up and up, and you get to the point of what's known as hyperinflation. So people feel it right now. Now, I think it's important that I very quickly explain why that phenomenon makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. So what's happening is, exactly. So people look at assets. Most people don't even understand what they are. Obviously, your audience will, but the vast majority of humans, they don't even know what that means. So people understand a house. So that would be an asset. Stocks, an asset. Debt, an asset. Gold, an asset. Okay, those are art assets. Those are all assets. Now, people look at those going up in value over time, and sometimes they really do go up in value. Like with AI coming online, it's able to do things that we weren't able to do before, and so that sector of the market is outpacing inflation for real. Now, we're probably in a bubble right now, but anyway, we'll set that aside. So Austin, when people first started fleeing to Austin, then housing prices really did go up. You were outpacing inflation. But for the most part, if your house is going up in value, your stock portfolio is going up in value, what's actually happening is the dollar is going down in value, and the value of the house or the stocks is actually staying the same. And so it's basically just reflective of how much the dollar is weakening over time. So if you're trying to save your way to retirement, you will never get there because your money will be inflated away. And even at 2%, at like 10 years, it's 20% of your wealth is gone. So during COVID, the 5 years during COVID, Trueflation pegs us at like 26% inflation. So that is terrifying. So you have to buy assets, but most people don't know enough to do it.
Well, and it's interesting because I've gotten in this debate before, and I said, there's two things that really got us in trouble, because people say, why is there's this big split that starts to happen in the 70s between real wages and I said, well, you have a fiat currency combined with being the world's reserve currency, and those two things combined are incredibly dangerous. And then the easiest thing in the world to peg it to is the rich people, and I'm like, okay, here's the problem. If you do understand what's happening, of course you're going to respond accordingly. I can be the wealthiest person on the planet, hate inflationary monetary policy, wish we had sound money, wish we had better fiscal policy. But at the end of the day, I also know I've got to convert from dollars to assets quickly and effectively, because it's going to at least increase my share of that wealth which does exist. But to your point, everybody else that's just trying to get by, that's just trying to make it, that's living off their paycheck or savings, they are increasingly at a worse position as a result of it. And then you get into this environment where, again, the easiest villain to point to is, do you got stuff? Well, clearly you had to get the stuff through bad means, because the rest of us are working hard and we don't have stuff. And I really get concerned, because I could not agree more with the analysis that you just gave. Whenever I tell people, again, was just answering this question, what's the biggest problem facing us? I'm like, monetary policy. They're like, what do you even mean by that? I said, well, fiat currency and world's reserve currency, and how do you think we get to a point? Because I don't think there's any way we get out of this mess without pain.
That's for sure.
What is the best way in your opinion? What would be the best way, using kind of the thought process you're talking before? What's the best way to mitigate that pain while at the same time preparing people for the idea that, look, there is something better on the other side of this, but there's no going around it or over it. That's what got us into this trouble, right? It's we'd have some sort of economic problem, and instead of saying, okay, we've got to deal with this or we've got to readjust, it was no, we'll just print more money. and that'll get us through, and that'll mitigate the damage in the short term. But in the long term, we've created now something that's potentially catastrophic. Do you think there's any way out of the catastrophe? No way out of the pain, but any way out of the catastrophe, or are we just headed for a sovereign debt crisis where we're going to have to fight it out?
Well, history says you're far more likely to head to a sovereign debt crisis, but it's not 100% of the time. So the great news is, at a high level, obviously you can get deep into the complexities of this stuff, but at a high level, it's very simple. You have to spend less and you have to make more. You just have to do it at the governmental level. So the question becomes, given that even if you tax the wealthy at 100%, it pays for something like 7 months of the government. It's so small. You can tax them literally to zero, and it won't get you out of your problem. So you have to bring down the expenditures. You cannot be increasing your debt at the rate that you're increasing. So you have to do that. You have to find things in the government to cut. And then you need to unlock GDP growth. Now, the great news is, deregulating tends to unlock that. And you're heading towards AI, which could be this insane boom if it really becomes the thing that we want. Right now, I think we're still in a bit of the hype cycle, but that hype cycle isn't fake. It's just a natural part of this curve, where money is flooding into the market because people can see what it's going to become. But things tend to take longer to get there than you think. And just like in 1999, pets.com looked so brilliant. Amazon.com looked so brilliant. People were right about one and wrong about the other. And so depending on which one you were in, you either got clobbered or you became an absolute multimillionaire, or in some cases just billionaires.
Yeah.
So we'll get to the other side of this from a technological standpoint, from a market standpoint, and there will be one question that remains on the table that will determine whether we have 3% GDP, whether we go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can't see us getting much north of that. That would be fantasy land. But it would be, if there is no upper bounds to artificial intelligence, then you will almost certainly race through a period of skyrocketing GDP, only to find yourself post-capitalistic on the other side. Now, that's one of those that I don't know if the right frame of reference is nothing is ever as good as you think it's going to be. Or if this is one of those moments where my inability to actually believe in the future that I can imagine as a sci-fi writer, can imagine an incredible post-capitalistic future, but I'm not making those bets financially. I am still hedging the life out of my bets. So I don't know which of those two things is right. So we'll see. Again, this goes back to my healthy distrust of myself and my ability to predict the future well. But that's the way out, that people get fiscally responsible and we unlock GDP.
Well, I'll tell you what, I certainly don't disagree that. And I've been very encouraged by what Doge is trying to do, but I remember listening to Elon Musk speak at the last cabinet meeting, and it was amazing because I think there was a lot of people that thought, we're going to find it all in fraud, waste, and abuse. And I remember talking with people going, no, the federal government is legally spending money on things that it has no business spending money on, that it has no business attempting to manage. And it's simply become, it's unmanageable. And we're going to have to reevaluate how we think about things. With the last couple of minutes here, is there any advice you would give to people that are trying to navigate this? They're starting their life. They don't want to believe that everything's doomed, right? What are the things that they can do to put themselves in the best position to be able to navigate some of these things that are going to be coming down the pike?
All right, so this is why I changed the focus of my channel. Originally, my channel was all about mindset, and then I realized, okay, well, you build a mindset specifically to deploy it against something. To put it in the largest nutshell possible, you want to build a model of cause and effect in the world. And so if one of the things you need to figure out is, okay, well, if I can't save my way to success, then I am going to have to buy assets. Assets can be bought well, or they can be bought poorly. But if you actually understand how the system works, you can increase your odds. There's still not going to be any guarantees, but you can increase your odds of doing this well. So I highly encourage people, and I assume this is why they listen to you, is they're trying to build a model of the world that has extremely high predictive validity. And then you actually have to take action. So be thoughtful. Don't overextend yourself. Don't think that you understand the world better than you do. You very much want to have a healthy skepticism, to distrust yourself a certain amount. I think that a lot of our problems are because people trust themselves way too much, and make the best decision you can make with imperfect information. And if people are doing that on a loop of setting their ego aside and saying, okay, I know what I'm going to find out is that I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough at this yet. And so I'm just going to get better, and I'm going to take my L's and I'm going to take them as a learning experience, and I'm going to get better, and I'm just going to keep marching forward. And just like I don't think it makes any sense to live your life as if you are in a deterministic universe, I don't think it makes any sense to approach the world as if you can't figure this stuff out. So be optimistic, be hopeful, lean into those positive emotions, pursue things that make you feel expansive instead of contracting. Remember that life literally has nothing better to offer you than love that is returned. So find things in your life that return that love. And this one might be a little bit of a curveball, but I say this even from my mansion, is I remind myself very routinely to have very inexpensive hobbies so that I could love a version of my life that just doesn't need money at all. I think that that is very wise. And then last but not least, never again make excuses. Your life is an exact reflection of your choices. If you want a different outcome, make different choices.
Well, thank you very much for that, and I'm glad. Again, when you said find inexpensive hobbies, I remember when my wife and I first got married at 19 and 20, and had nothing.
Whoa.
Yeah, 19 and 20, 26 years this year, and
let's go, man! Congratulations.
And I do think it is amazing to be able to go through that journey with somebody who was there before it all started, and who you know will be there with you even if it all fell apart. So Tom, thank you very much for being with us today, and thank you thank you everyone for joining us. Please go check out Impact Theory. It's not just a YouTube channel, it's not just a podcast. Really interesting conversations, really interesting opportunities. Again, go out there, be optimistic, even in the midst of everything that's going on. Be optimistic and keep fighting. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next episode.